Hi, I'm Lee Bortons, and I want to explain more to you about classical conversations, but I'm going to start with what might feel backwards to you. I'm going to begin by explaining some about the challenge program, because I'm not going to go into a lot of details about the curriculum or the logistics of the program. The leaders that are in your area know this very well, but they've asked me to share with you kind of how we got to where we are and what the overall vision for the programs are. And so I'm going to begin with a challenge program because that actually was the first program we have. And so whenever I tell my story, I kind of think chronologically, and so that's a good place to begin. So basically what happened was as our older children hit middle school, and they'd always been homeschooled, and we were committed to homeschooling, we, like every other parent though, got a little nervous and wondered if we were doing it right and what could we do to improve. And also at that time, a lot of books on classical education and recovering it were being written in the United States. And so I was reading those books because I tried to stay up on various educational trends in homeschooling. And as I was reading one of the books, I had this my husband's voice, his name is Rob, was kind of whispering in my ear as I read this book. Because the entire time we'd homeschooled through the foundation years, which is our younger children's the program for classical conversations. So when our boys were younger, my husband kept telling me I was doing it all wrong. And I didn't know what he was talking about because I was pretty well educated and I did well at school and I read early and all those kind of things. And so, but he couldn't articulate what he meant by saying I was doing it wrong. And he was always very kind. He let me keep going because I was the one at home homeschooling them. And he was very supportive. But philosophically, he felt like we were missing something. And now looking back, I understand what that was. My husband's almost 10 years older than I am, and he went to what in the United States was called a grammar school. That's what we used to call all the schools for younger children in our country. I'm older, and I went to one of the first elementary schools. The educational philosophy had changed in the United States between when he was born and I was born. And what he wanted was our boys to have a grammar education. And I knew what a modern education looked like. And so that's kind of where the tension was. And so I started reading these books on classical education, and I thought, I think this is what my husband's been saying. And so I went back to him and read him some various passages, and he said, yes, that's what I've been trying to tell you. And I told him, well, you just needed to use more words or write a book or something. And of course, what the reality was is I'd been homeschooling long enough and understanding education in a better way over those years that I could now finally hear what he was trying to tell me. But this then continues to be a problem with classical education because so many of us were raised in modern times with modern education that we don't really quite know what that difference is. And so as our boys were in those middle school years and I was starting to understand what he was saying and had a hunger for just improving what I was doing, these books were beginning to be very helpful. And the one thing I realized through not just the reading but just our family life is that as high schoolers and raising young men, they didn't want to be with their mother all the time, that they needed some peers in education. They needed some other mentors. We were getting that through work opportunities and service opportunities, as well as our church and youth leadership. But I also wanted them to have academic opportunities to be influenced by like-minded folks. And so I also was saying to myself, and they can only read so many Shakespeare plays with me. They really need to have a crowd to do that with. It would be better to have someone to do some chemistry experiments with or have debate regularly, not just join a debate club that does it on an occasional basis. And so my husband said, well, why don't you go ahead and put a program together? You seem to have a vision for all this, and invite some families into our home and have a classical community with our children so that they can have that kind of dialectic experience. So you see, now I was starting to get the words. I was starting to understand what classical education was. And of course, another aspect of that that's really emphasized in the challenge program is rhetoric. Giving the students, they spent a week at home working a lot on their own, and it gives them an opportunity by meeting once a week to discuss and share and present, to actually use words and papers and various technologies and different things, and to share it with other students who were studying similar material and could appreciate the things that they were sharing. And so that's how we kind of came up with the whole challenge program. My mother-in-law was living with us at the time, and I was sitting there having tea with her one day and said, I don't know what to call this thing. And she said, it's a pretty challenging curriculum. Why don't you just call it the Challenge Program? And the name stuck. So I have my mother-in-law to thank for that title. So the Challenge Program in general is about what I've already been sharing with you, giving the students basically a reading list that they work on during the week with some assignments attached to it, so that then they can come together prepared to do additional dialectic or discussion activities, as well as different presentations. Also, they're young people. They want friendships. They want to know that they have other folks that are as interested in the same things they are. They want to know that academics, the way they're doing it is, even though it kind of is odd compared to the rest of the country, that there are other families that are just as normal as they are and just as excited about education as they are. And so it gives them an opportunity to form their own peers that are classically trained in the Christian worldview. So one of the things I want to encourage you in the Challenge Program is to look at our guides as just that, guides. You do not have to do everything that's in the curriculum guides that we provide. We suggest that you do as much as possible of them, because the more prepared your students are, the better they'll be able to engage with the other children when they meet each other in the seminars. But Classical Conversations' goal is not to make your life difficult as a homeschooling parent. It's meant to actually challenge you and give you support to try to just go a little bit farther, a little bit harder than you might on your own, in the sense of looking at academics from a rigorous perspective. And just like it helps us to have friends in our community, the other like-minded parents, it helps our students to do a better job too, if they know they have a friend that they're working on a project with, or will be interested in just seeing their face one day a week, or maybe even will help them with some math problems. And so the whole idea of community continues to be the emphasis of what we're doing, because we are a Christian organization through and through, and the body of Christ is the one thing that we are that, and all we can do is practice being better at unity and working with one another. So I encourage you to homeschool through high school. One of the things that kind of breaks my heart is most people don't homeschool through high school. They'll be very committed during the early years. The kids are little. It doesn't do any harm. It's mostly playing. It's more fun. They need to have that adult attention. So parents are just more willing to homeschool through high school. So parents are more willing to homeschool through elementary school. What I would like to encourage you to do is to really think hard about doing it through high school. And it's for this reason. As Jesus went forth in his adult life and in his ministry, he said so many times, "You know my Father because you know me," or "You know me because you know my Father." If our goal is to raise sons and daughters who say that about us as their parents, "You know me because you know my mother," "You know my Father because you know me," then sending them to be mentored by other adults who don't have your worldview right at the time when they're old enough to understand what your worldview is, as well as they care about becoming young men and women, I find that just counterintuitive to the idea that we're trying to inculcate in them, that they too can go out into the world and say, "You know my Father because you know me." And so what a crucial time it is for moms and dads to spend with their teenage children, so that the unity of Christ is seen not just in the church, but in each little family they meet, not just in the church, but in each family that professes to know Christ. And so I hope you really enjoy the challenge years, because